So, first of all, congratulations to Max. He's the first person who could pronounce my last name properly. My name's Anna. For the last 2 years, I've been working at the Government Digital Service, and today I'm going to tell you a small or a big story about how we are trying to put people at the heart of what the government does. First of all, for those of you who don't know what the Government Digital Service is, it's a team that sits within Cabinet Office, which is one of the government departments, specifically in a group called Efficiency and Reform Group. So GDS was formed several years ago with a very specific task to enable the government to be more efficient when spending money on technology. There's various different teams within GDS. The most famous team is the digital team. So you may have heard of things like gov.uk. It's the biggest achievement of GDS so far. It's one website that combines information from many different ministerial websites. You may have heard of the service standard that GDS did. It's like a catalog of what points digital services have to comply with so that the services that the government builds are actually useful for people. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I won't be talking about these things today. So my bit of GDS is a bit less known. It's called technology, government technology. Our team is responsible. The task of our team is to make sure that the government is given proper technology and competencies so that people who work in the government can deliver great public services for citizens. So today, first of all, I'm going to describe what's the need for government technology. So what is the problem that we want to tackle? Why do we need to exist? Second of all, I'll describe our approach. So how government technology would like to change the way government technology is delivered. And also my approach for how I would like to be a user researcher in that team. My background is in anthropology, so sometimes it can be tricky to fit in a real world. And I'll finish by sharing some findings and lessons that I've gathered during the last 2 years. So, first of all, the government has always been spending massive amounts of money on government IT. And by government IT, I mean laptops, printers, peripherals, screens, networks, security, restrictions, etc. To give you an example, the cost of supporting a desktop computer in a local government is £364 per year, while the cost of supporting a similar kind of desktop in a central government is up to £1,600 per year. If you're wondering ever about how many desktop computers there are in British government, it's 4 million, so you can do the math. What's interesting is the difference in this cost. Why does a computer in central government cost £1,300 more per year, one desktop computer? Liam Maxwell published a very interesting paper, Better for Less, that states that security restrictions that are very important for the government are not enough to explain such a difference in cost. And from my experience, neither is the quality of devices that people are given. For example, I've seen many people using phones like this on a daily basis in the government. People are very smart and they develop excellent workarounds for how to deal with outdated technology. One team that I talked to marks really slow desktop computers with black dots. So if you work in a hot desking environment, like many people do these days, and you're late for work, it's not your lucky day because you'll probably be stuck with a device that doesn't really work. It takes 20 minutes to boot up. It freezes every time you need to copy something from Outlook to Microsoft Word, etc. Another team, you can see a pink dot there. They mark computers that should be booked for specific employees with a pink dot. Unfortunately, since it's a hot desking environment, not everyone knows what a pink dot means, so there can be people from other teams who come and sit in that area, which means that the person who should be sitting there has nowhere to work from. They cannot do their job. There are some initiatives in the government that try to respond to flexible ways of working. I really like this picture. It shows a sheet of paper that was attached to a couch put in a breakout area in one of the government departments. The couch is personified. I am not suitable for conference calls. I can't be booked or reserved. I'm terrible at keeping secrets, so anything sensitive should be discussed in a meeting room. I think it's a good start. I think it still could be better. That's why with technology costing less and less and technology developing faster and faster, like we all know, GDS, building on the experience from the digital space, wanted to prove that delivering technology for the government can be done differently. So they wanted to test, maybe we can do things faster, cheaper, and more importantly, maybe it's possible to deliver really good technology for civil servants as well, the same way as we deliver excellent digital services for the citizens. So we wanted to deliver technology at least as good as people have at home. This statement can be kind of controversial because not everyone has excellent technology at home, but you get the idea. And the technology that we deliver should be tailored to what people actually need to do. GDS has always been saying that user needs are more important than government needs. So, for example, this is why gov.uk has been tailored only through user needs, so what it is that users want to find out from the government online rather than what the government wants to publish online. Developing on that statement, government technology wanted to show that civil servants are users too, and the same way we are listening to the needs of citizens, we need to listen to the needs of civil servants in terms of technology when they work in the government. So, when I joined GDS a couple of years ago, I was asked fascinating questions. I was told to go and find out what it means to be a civil servant, go and find out whether we can actually support civil servants with a better technology. Coming back from anthropology background, digital anthropology background, I was in seventh heaven. I'm like, yes, I won't have to do usability tests, I won't have to sit in the lab, I'm going to hide myself in a government building, stay there for a year, observe the environment, talk to some people, and then come back with a beautiful theory for why things are the way they are. Well, I quickly learned this will not be the case for two things: Agile, and user research is a team sport. Agile. So, Scott explained what Agile is. Agile is not a novelty for user researchers who work in the digital space these days, but it was a novelty for us working on a technology infrastructure project. How do we do things in an agile way in such an environment? Especially for me, this was quite revolutionary when I learned things like show and tells, proof of concept, alpha. I was told that I won't have time to be alone somewhere in my ethnographic cave. I have to go there and test things with people as quickly as possible. So I was quite sad, but I thought, okay, better this than nothing. Then, user research is a team sport is another slogan that GDS is quite proud of. This means that understanding users is not the responsibility of only user researchers. Every person in the team needs to understand users in the same way, which means that, again, I couldn't go alone and do interviews on my own. There were people following me. People like designers, technical architects, engineers. They had to listen to the same things as I was listening to. On top of that, I had to do workshops all the time and blog all the time and present all the time, and this has taken a lot of my time, my precious time that I wanted to spend on researching on my own, but it turned out quite useful in the end. In terms of user research, during the last 2 years, I worked in 2 departments, Cabinet Office and Home Office. I did hundreds of interviews. I observed people. I organized workshops, testing sessions. And the good thing is that I was really embedded in these departments, so I was going through the same onboarding processes, I was going to the same all-staff events, which gave me a very good access to people, because people were already there just waiting to be asked questions. It's just that no one has asked them questions yet. People talked to them about public services, but no one has talked to them about how it is to work in the government. So they were there. I had too many people to talk to. I had to say no to some of them. I treated the government as a culture. This is just my own interpretation of a culture. I kind of know what it means, but not so much. So What I mean here is that I wanted to look at the environment holistically. So I studied material culture, like objects people work with, digital and analog. I focused on immaterial culture, policies, behaviors, attitudes. How is knowledge shared in the government? What do people do when they work together, etc.? Rather than focusing on a specific part of this environment. I wanted to go as broad as possible, and I was lucky that I was given an opportunity to do so. So knowing kind of my perspective, the environment where I worked, and the kind of projects I worked on, I needed to figure out how I can be useful as a user researcher working for the government technology. And I wanted to do these things through 3 approaches. First of all, build empathy, break artificial divisions that are currently in the government, and then making information useful. So building empathy, I think everyone knows here how important it is to build empathy when we are designing things for anyone. By building empathy, I mean understanding who people are that you're delivering to. I was quite surprised in the cabinet office when most of my team thought that the cabinet office is made from young, forward-thinking, ready for change policy advisors who welcome us with open arms. And they were quite surprised to understand that it's not the case, that for some people we are a threat. Some people who work in the government don't want us there, they don't want change. So how do we tackle that? We used personas. Again, most of you probably know what personas are. Fictional characters that focus on motivations, attitudes, goals. We detached them completely from roles that people have in the government. People in the government talk too much about roles, job descriptions, grades, etc. Sometimes during meetings, I'm presented with 79 persona groupings. I don't know what that is, but it turns out it's just purely job descriptions. That's how people in the government interpret user research sometimes. So personas were used mostly by people responsible for the service. So people who were designing transition periods, like how do we transition people to a new technology? How do we design service desk? How do we design training materials? They were the ones who used the persona's material to understand through which channels to get to people, how to introduce innovation so that they benefit from that. In terms of the technical solutions, so which device do we buy, which applications do we buy, I had to fight a small fight to make people understand that personas should not be used to say persona A is receiving Macs, persona B is receiving a tablet. That's not what should happen. For that purpose, we used user profiles that were done in the home office. User profiles, again, when I was talking about how people interpret persona groupings in the government, sometimes we can also see profiles such as, I'm a mobile worker, or I'm a public-facing worker. When we came to the home office, which is 35,000 people, we quickly understood that this way of seeing how people work is not gonna work, it's too simplistic. I'm a mobile worker because I'm talking on a phone while walking on a corridor, and I'm a mobile worker because I'm in border force and I'm running around London trying to find someone. How do these two mobile workers relate to each other? So after, again, hundreds of interviews, we wanted to dig deeper, and we came up with 6 different dimensions that we think have a direct influence on how people deal with technology at work. And one of them is mobility, but then there's interactions, applications, so what kind of applications do you use, time criticality of your work, security classification of the work, of the information that you're dealing with. I missed one. Oh, it's 2 for applications. Either standard applications or government applications. That's the different dimensions. So this way of looking at things allowed us, again, to detach from artificial things such as like, hi, I'm a grade 7, which is kind of senior in the government, and I'm a policy advisor and I work in this team. So we detached ourselves from that. We focused on what people need in terms of technology, and we ended up having 7 profiles. I think it's too many, but that include many different people coming from many different parts of the department. So for example, Out and About that we created includes both user researchers and immigration enforcement officers, because both of these roles include going to fieldworks a lot, having to record information real time, etc. Last but not least, making the information useful. So during the workshops I explained, we were presenting findings from different parts of the Home Office, and these findings were then translated into user needs that then were turned into user requirements and put into a backlog assigned to specific product streams. So for example, during one workshop it turns out that there's a couple of training needs that the training team needs to take care of, or end user device team needs to take care of. Or sometimes all of these needs are already addressed, so we don't have to do much, which is an overstatement, but you know what I mean. And also the profiles I just described were quantified. So since we sampled the population of the Home Office and we talked to everyone from different roles, different seniority levels, different locations, we could scale up that information and we could know how many people sit within each of the profiles. And this was the information that the technical architects really needed the most, because they needed to know how to approximate how many computers to buy and when, and what kind of technology will benefit whom. Okay, so findings. What did I learn during this time? First of all, mobility or flexibility. There's this assumption that technology transition and technology innovation should make people work in a more mobile way. In my experience, while talking to people in the government, this is not always the case. Some people don't want to work more mobile. Maybe they will have to eventually in future, because that's what, but they don't want to. Or they just cannot, because the processes that are around technology do not correspond to working flexibly. For example, a lot of processes are paper-based, departmental-based, they need big screens, etc. So in my opinion, thinking about flexibility is much more useful than thinking about mobility, because it allows people to work as flexibly as they want, not as mobile as they want. Secondly, when introducing change in one organization and one department, I think it's very beneficial to look outside of this department. So for example, in the Cabinet Office, which is a department responsible for managing all the departments, we had to look how the change that we are introducing in the Cabinet Office will influence other departments. In here you can see that in Whitehall all the government departments are quite close to each other. This is just physically. When it comes to digital collaboration, it's not that close at all. People struggle to exchange information, documents, they cannot share knowledge with each other, even if all of them they actually work on the same thing. So I think enabling more holistic change and thinking more broadly rather than just about your organization is a good thing. Tailoring innovation. So I spoke before about how we cannot just introduce, did I? Or maybe I didn't, sorry. We cannot just introduce new devices just because it's a new device, and we need to give you a device because it's better. We need to make more effort to understand what it is that we want to achieve by introducing this innovation, and how are we going to do that so that people actually understand what to do with it. Not everyone can just pick a MacBook Air and just start working with it. So unless we spend some time explaining that, the transition that we are conducting will just fail. And this leads to my next point about developing skills and competencies. So again, instead of investing in new technology because that's what everyone does, we should think about what it is that we want this new technology to do to the users. So what are the gaps in development? What are the gaps in how people work? And how we can address that, and with what? In here, it's a graph prepared by my colleague from GDS for a different project, but it matches this idea that this is a journey of a civil servant. So from the moment they join civil service to the moment they leave, and this axis is happy and sad. So you can see that people are very enthusiastic when they join civil service, but then this enthusiasm is dropping because their needs are not really met. This can be in terms of services, many different things. And the third column, development, is something that civil servants struggle with a lot. So I think that if technology can address that side of the graph, that would be great, because then we could keep people working for the government, and they would be happy. And lastly, it's more than a device. This is a quote of my ex-boss, Tom. I stole it, I'm sorry. We need to look outside of the devices and outside of products, and I think that sometimes change does not have to be limited to technology. Sometimes change in policies, change in processes, change in services can actually address the core of the issue. It doesn't have to be a new product or a new device. And right now we are working on continuing the work we did in the Home Office by taking the profiles and trying to see how they map across the government. So eventually we would like to know how the whole government looks when it comes to ways of working. And when I'm talking about that with technical architects at GDS, they agree. They say, Anna, we don't necessarily think that we need to build something. We need to build a new service. We need to buy new things. We want to know what's the core of the issue so that we know how to address this problem and stop wasting money just on new tools, just like that. And I think that if we put people at the heart of research, that's one way of getting there. There can be other ways, but it's one way. Thank you.